Tori and Kyle Breyer had a home filled with everything except the one thing they wanted most. Their shelves groaned under the weight of fertility books, silent monuments to years of heartbreak, failed attempts, and quiet desperation. But one night, the universe answered. A violent, unnatural vibration rattled the very foundations of their farmhouse. Outside, something dark and foreign tore through the night sky, crashing deep into their land. Years melted away in the flicker of joyful home videos. A sweet, bright-eyed boy named Brandon grew up before their eyes, playing hide-and-seek, answering questions in class, and catching the eye of a girl named Caitlin. He seemed perfect, but innocence has an expiration date. One night, drawn by a primal, unspoken pull, Brandon began to sleepwalk. He drifted down into the pitch-black basement, magnetized by the alien craft that brought him to Earth. When Tori found him, he wasn't her boy anymore. He was chanting in a guttural, venomous language. She managed to hold him, whispering maternal comforts until the fever broke. But the rot had already set in. "It's Mom, Brandon. Look at me. You're okay." But he wasn't. The next morning, the illusion shattered. When the family lawnmower refused to start, a surge of raw, unchecked fury washed over Brandon. He hurled the heavy machine across the yard with terrifying ease. Mesmerized by his own power, he deliberately pressed his bare palm into the spinning steel blade. The engine choked and died. His skin remained flawless, not a single scratch. The tension spiked during a family diner lunch with his aunt and uncle. When Uncle Noah playfully offered him a toy gun, Kyle's reaction was instant, sharp, and laced with panic. No guns, we talked about this. But Brandon didn't beg, he demanded. The celebration ended in an uncomfortable, abrupt silence, leaving their waitress staring after them as they walked out. Days bled into a cold, distant reality. Kyle watched in quiet horror as Brandon casually chewed on a metal fork, bending the prongs against his teeth without a wince. Desperate to connect, Kyle took him hunting, trying to have the birds and the bees talk, after Tori found lingerie ads hidden under the boy's mattress. But Brandon's desires were darker. That night, he stood like a phantom outside Caitlin's window, basking in the glow of her laptop music until she closed it, sensing a predator in the dark. Inside, her mother, the waitress from the diner, rushed in to find her daughter suffocating in pure panic. At school, Brandon sat in an eerie, detached silence, filling his notebook with jagged, disturbing symbols, while his teacher expressed grave concerns to Tori. At home, Kyle caught him terrorizing the farm chickens, his eyes vacant. By nightfall, the coop was a slaughterhouse. The birds butchered, the heavy wooden door ripped entirely off its hinges. Tori desperately clung to denial, blaming a wolf, but Kyle knew the truth. "Babe, a wolf didn't do this. A wolf can't rip a locked door off its frame. It's Brandon." Tori snapped back, blinded by love. "Stop it, Kyle. It was a wolf." The breaking point arrived during a school trust fall exercise. Caitlin, still terrified from the night before, stepped aside. Brandon crashed to the floor. When she called him a pervert, a single icy word left his lips. Liar. Forced by the coach to help him up, Caitlin reached out. The moment Brandon gripped her hand, he didn't just squeeze, he crushed. The sickening crunch of snapping bones echoed through the gym, followed by her agonizing screams. In the principal's office, Tori desperately spun the violence as a tragic accident. Caitlin's mother wasn't buying it, screaming for an arrest and branding Brandon the son of a psycho. Tori fiercely fired back, but as they left, Brandon paused. He turned to the waitress and delivered a cold, dead-eyed stare that promised retribution. That night, the truth became undeniable. Disturbed by her son's behavior, Tori began researching meteorites, only to be interrupted by an eerie, crimson glow bleeding from the barn. She ran out to find her son floating in midair, bathed in an unholy light, chanting a singular, chilling command: "Take the world." Suddenly, he dropped, slicing his hand on the jagged hull of the ship. The sight of his own blood triggered a manic rage. He screamed at Tori, accusing her of poisoning his entire life with lies, before vanishing into the woods. Deep in the shadows of the forest, his suppressed fury finally detonated. With a roar of pure malice, twin beams of searing laser vision erupted from his eyes, carving through the darkness. He returned to Caitlin's room like a nightmare, slipping through the shadows while she sat paralyzed, with her arm in a heavy cast. "Don't be afraid," he whispered, a terrifying calm in his voice. "You know how special I am." When she wept, crying that her mother forbade her from seeing him, his face went expressionless. "I'll take care of that." He vanished, leaving a single flower on her desk. At the diner, Caitlin's mother was locking up when the air turned freezing. Outside, Brandon's twisted symbols were freshly carved into the glass. The lights flickered, died, and then the windows exploded inward. A shard of flying glass tore through her eye. Bleeding, blinded, and sobbing in terror, she swung a baseball bat wildly into the dark, hitting nothing but air. She barricaded herself inside the heavy steel walk-in cooler. It was a tomb. 2 lines of blinding red heat sliced through the vault door like butter. Brandon ripped the reinforced steel off its hinges, stepped into the fog, and locked eyes with his prey. The screaming didn't last long. By morning, Brandon sat at the breakfast table, casually telling his parents that everything was handled. At the diner, the sheriff stood in a pool of blood, staring at the butchered remains of the waitress and the cryptic mark left behind. Brandon's Aunt Marilee, a school counselor, tried to break through his shell later that day, but met a wall of stone. Sensing the danger, she threatened to call the police. That evening, a terrified Kyle confessed his darkest fears to a friend at a local bar. "My son might be a monster." He didn't know how right he was. At that exact moment, the lights in Marilee's house began to strobe. Brandon materialized in her bathroom, his voice a low, venomous threat. "Don't call the cops. It won't be good for anyone." He pretended to leave, but as Noah arrived, he found the boy hiding deep within the shadows of Marilee's closet, wearing a grotesque, makeshift mask. Noah aggressively dragged him outside, throwing him into his truck and threatening to expose him. Brandon didn't argue. He effortlessly hurled Noah against the garage door. Terrified, Noah slammed on the gas and tore down the road, but the truck's engine sputtered and died. Through the cracked windshield, Brandon appeared out of nowhere, standing dead center in the road. Noah screamed. With a casual lift of his arms, Brandon hoisted the entire truck into the air, held it suspended for a horrifying beat, and smashed it roof first into the asphalt. As Noah lay crushed and dying in the wreckage, Brandon knelt down, dipped his fingers into his uncle's blood, and painted his symbol on the dirt. When Brandon returned home, claiming his torn clothes were the result of bullies, Kyle's suspicion turned to cold certainty. A horrific nightmare of baby Brandon's eyes glowing crimson woke him to a phone call. At the hospital, a hysterical Marilee delivered the news of Noah's death. Back at the farm, Kyle confronted the boy. "What did you do to him?" "He was my friend." Brandon's response was a violent shove that shattered the pantry doors, followed by a flat, deadpan, "Okay." Kyle found the blood-soaked shirt, but Tori, drowning in denial, still refused to see the monster under her roof. The next day, under the guise of a normal hunting trip, Kyle led Brandon deep into the woods. Simultaneously, the sheriff arrived at the farmhouse, with absolute proof linking Brandon to the murders. As Tori turned the sheriff away, she stumbled upon Brandon's hidden notebook. The pages were a gallery of horrors, detailed sketches of the waitress with a gouged eye, piles of faceless corpses, and that same relentless phrase written over and over, "Take the world." Deep in the isolated forest, Kyle let his son walk ahead. Trembling, he raised his rifle, lined up the scope with the back of Brandon's head, and pulled the trigger. Crack! The bullet struck and bounced cleanly off the boy's skull. Brandon turned slowly, a look of mild surprise on his face. Kyle desperately tried to chamber another round, but time had run out. Brandon vanished, then rocketed out of the sky in his blood-red cape and hood. He slammed Kyle into the dirt, lifting him by the throat. Kyle gasped out a pathetic apology, but there was no mercy left in his son. 2 beams of concentrated heat erupted from Brandon's eyes, burning straight through Kyle's skull. At home, Tori's phone finally rang. "Where's your father, Brandon?" she panicked. The voice on the other end was a flat, chilling bassline. "Dad's gone. I'm coming home." Seconds later, Brandon tore through the farmhouse like a missile, ripping the walls to splinters. Tori's frantic 911 call was cut short as the sheriff and his deputy arrived into a war zone. Before the sheriff could even draw his weapon, a blur of red and gray slammed into him, tearing him apart in midair. Tori and the deputy fled inside the collapsing wreckage. Upstairs, the deputy frantically radioed for backup, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the receiver. Brandon appeared. Flash. He was in front of her. Flash. He was behind her. The radio went dead to the sound of tearing flesh. Tori scrambled out a window, crashing hard onto the debris below. Limping, bleeding, she crawled into the only sanctuary left, the barn. Stumbling over the mutilated, rotting corpse of the waitress, she reached the meteor. Remembering it was the only thing that had ever cut him, she broke off a razor-sharp shard of the alien metal and hid it behind her back. "Brandon," she called out, her voice cracking with forced maternal warmth. The floating leviathan drifted into the barn, his terrifying mask hiding his face. Tori stepped closer, whispering how much she loved him, gently pulling back his hood to reveal the wide, innocent eyes of the boy she raised. They embraced. With a gasp of desperation, Tori brought the shard down toward his neck. Brandon's reflex was instantaneous. He caught her wrist mid-strike, his grip turning her bones to ash. The shard clattered to the floor. The innocence in his eyes vanished, replaced by a hateful, blinding rage. He seized his mother by the throat and ignited into the sky. They rocketed through the clouds, higher and higher, until the earth curved beneath them, and the farmhouse was nothing but a speck of dust. He looked at the woman who called herself his mother, one last time, and let go. Tori fell silently through the stratosphere, plunging toward the earth. Brandon stayed in the heavens, watching her go, as a commercial airliner sped directly toward him. The next morning, the smoke cleared over a landscape of utter devastation. The news anchor's voice trembled over footage of the wreckage. A commercial flight, completely obliterated after colliding with a local farmhouse, leaving no survivors. Sitting in the relief camp, Brandon calmly bit into a chocolate chip cookie. His face was a perfect blank mask of an orphaned, innocent boy. But the nightmare was just beginning. Across the globe, the sky began to burn. Cities crumbled, monuments fell, and the body count began to rise exponentially. Brandon Breyer had finally accepted his birthright, and the world was helpless to stop him. This movie ends here. If you enjoyed this movie explanation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon.